So now the time has come to study the very main line of the Pirts, the very main line of the Pirts is the bishop b5 check in the Austrian attack. It's not even the very main line in the sense of that everybody goes for it. It's the main line in the sense of we need to know it well in order to be able to play it, because it's so sharp and so heavy theoretically. But no worries, I prepared the material in such a way that I think we will be able to go through it together and well, understand everything in such a way so you'll be able to play it if necessary tomorrow morning. So let's get started. The main line, bishop b5 check. We'll have various moves here, but for this course, we stick with the main line, bishop d7. And now white has some deviations, some alternatives to the main line. The main move is e5. The only, just get rid of this. The only plausible alternative is taking on d7 immediately. So takes here. Usually not great to take on d7 early because, well, in a way this helps us develop the knight. And this is also the case here, I feel, to quite some extent. Yeah, we just take knight bd7. And now e5. Here, get the same move as in a lot of the main lines, which you will still see. Doesn't work well because black has this slightly surprising trick with knight h5. And now a lot of white's pawns are hanging. And as so often before, elsewhere in this course, there is no good way for white to defend the pawns. And white needs to compensate for this by doing something else. And here, g4 is the only critical move, because white, well, traps the knight. And turns out that black has a very powerful way to get a lot of pawns for this knight. We take on f4, take, and take. And a bit surprisingly, white cannot recapture with anything. So knight d4 or queen d4 will lose a piece after d takes e5. And white will be, down a few pawns. So white has to move the knight, and black takes the pawn, and it turns out that we get like this really massive pawn center, which has the potential to start moving. Later we will castle, and then at some point, maybe in the end game, like we'll start rolling the pawns. So these 3 pawns here, they look much stronger than the knight, and it's not the position that white would volunteer to go for from the opening. So this basically simplifies our life a lot as far as learning this opening is concerned. Of course, there are some problems in life that are not covered in this course, unfortunately. So life still has some problems for us in store, but as far as the Pirts is concerned, I got you. So all is good. So we go back. This was the move e5, the move which turned out not to work well. And other than that, white doesn't have so much choice, and black just threatens cd4 with an excellent position. As white has, long-term weaknesses that we know. The pawn on e4 will not run away. So d5 is normal. White, tries to keep it simple and keep the pawn center. And here, well, always we castle first, right? And now we actually have a threat that white needs to take seriously. Our threat is b5. Essentially, we just get like an excellent Benoni in all these structures. Like, remember how many times in this course we got the King's Indian defense where I said, white has a knight on c3, pawn on c2. This is not great for the King's Indian. The pawn should be on c4. The same is true for all the Benoni structures, like this one. The pawn should be on c4, and then things would be more difficult for black to arrange. White would have more space, more stability. But as such, white is actually vulnerable in this structure, as b5 is a threat. The pawn on e4 is hanging, and now white has several ways to deal with the threat, right? Ignoring it is not great, because now it becomes really difficult for white to handle the threat of b4, and black is already doing very well. This pawn is just in general much more valuable, and if white plays e5, then takes a knight g4, black is just better developed for any sort of sharpness that can ensue. It's also an interesting thing. It's a bit of a sign of the Austrian attack, and maybe not the sign is a wrong word, right? What is the word I'm looking for? It's a sort of a feature. It's the feature of the Austrian attack that white is having trouble with the development. The thing is that white spends all this time in the opening to play pawn moves, to play e4 and f4 and d4 and here d5. All these pawn moves, they cost time. They cost time, and because of the time spent to move pawns in the center, white often has surprising problems that white usually doesn't have in other openings, like developing or castling the king in time. So very often black is the first to castle, like almost invariably, and very often black is the one with the lead in development. So they're sort of getting the pawns all the way up front in the center costs time, has some risks entailed. So as I said, this is the feature of the Austrian attack, and some would argue maybe not the best of features to have, that you get all of your pawns rolling, but no pieces to support them. So castles is not great. Queen e2 is a possible move. Some good players have played this, preventing b5, but the queen has some of its own problems on e2, mainly because it's on the same file as the king, and the other weakness on e4. And black can play rook e8 here, creates dangerous threat of just rolling in the center with e6 and then later with d5, because white has, as I said, a lot of problems along the e file, as everything is there. So this is not great for white either, which leaves us with a4. a4 sort of stopping the move b5 in the most direct way. We play a6, we renew the threat. a5 is normal. I mean, this is this combination of moves, a4, a6, a5 is normal for a lot of these structures. Like you first prevent b5 directly, and then you prevent b5 by the virtue of this rule en passant. It's a weird rule, but we will now see why it's strategically important, right? I often wonder about various things, and some of the things I wonder about is how chess would be different if the rule of en passant hadn't been there, and everything about structures would be very, very different. Like here, a5 prevents b5, or at least makes it less desirable. To go at b5, and white takes ab. And of course, if the rule of en passant hadn't been there, then all the evaluations of structural changes would be different. So this is one of the magical mysteries of chess, that somebody thought of en passant, and how it had this sort of, far-reaching effect on the strategy in chess. And I feel like we don't really talk about this enough, but yeah, there you have it. Yeah, I like obscure topics. So AB anyway, not necessary. Knight takes B6. I like this knight here because it supports a lot of things in this particular position. First of all, it makes the D5 pawn more vulnerable, which might sound like a weird remark, but just think about what would happen if white starts going E5. Yeah, then the pawn really becomes vulnerable and relevant, right? The fact becomes relevant. And the other thing that this knight supports is the pawn on A4 that might go there. So quite a useful knight in this particular position. There are of course a lot of positions where the knight on B6 isn't great, but this is not one of them. So white castles, and as promised to play A5. So the idea is basically to just expand on the queen side, just throwing everything at white. And this is supported by the fact that black has this long diagonal and the white pawn on E4, and also in a way a bit the pawn on D5. They require a lot of attention. Yeah, the pawn on D5 if white goes E5. So white needs to do something about black's initiative on the queen side and not lose the pawn on E4 at the same time. And once again, black is better developed. White still has the bishop on C1. So I have a feeling in general black is doing very well here, which I think is a nice way to complete our study of this particular move. This was the move bishop D7, knight takes D7, and we saw that E5 doesn't quite work here, and D5 doesn't promise white, anything great either. Well, this means we can move on to E5, having discarded bishop D7 as a softer, a less dangerous alternative. E5, and now we play knight G4. So this move is necessary, and we're sort of entering more or less the very heart of darkness, if I may say so. And the lines, they become very, very concrete. Strategically, we are doing very well because the white center is actually collapsing. The pawns, as usual, they require a lot of attention, and they are hanging. So white needs a lot of tricks to sort of keep the pawns alive and in the game. But fortunately for white, there are quite a lot of tricks. So let's have a look at what exists before we move on. So let's remove these arrows for now and see what exists in this position. So we have E6, which is a very sort of principled continuation, going for it right away. We have H3, attacking the knight first, and we have bishop takes D7, which sort of includes this capture first to later do something else, just getting bishop B5 out of the picture. So it's just such a sharp position. I think it's early to speak of ideas and everything. I think we just have to sort of take this line by line and see where we end. So E6, it's with great pleasure that I start dealing with this line, because just so sort of pretty in so many ways. We take this pawn. Alternatives exist. There are other lines, but taking the pawn is, I think, by far the best and by far the cleanest. And here taking here is already a bit late, because now after taking on d7 with the queen, it's important. We keep this pawn protected. White runs out of tactical ideas. So this is not a way for white to play here. White's tactical ideas, they exist after knight g5. And now this is where the things, they start looking dangerous for black, right? If you would see this position for the first time, then you would be like these players in the 70s and 80s of the last century, that didn't have the computers. The theory of this line was just beginning, and you'd be one of those players, and you'd think, it looks pretty rough for black, right? This knight is hanging, the pawn is hanging, and once white takes the pawn, everything else will be hanging. But black has a move. Black is to play, and having a move in chess is sometimes more important than everything else, right? Because that's where the initiative is, right? You have the move, you can do stuff. And here in this position, basically this is the beginning of a most majestic trick. We take bishop takes b5, and now white can do various things. Essentially, all big captures are relevant. So knight takes e6, knight takes b5, and queen g4, and we'll investigate all three moves. And let's just go one by one. So knight takes b5 is important, keeping sort of black pieces sufficiently hanging. And the fact that two very big, very sort of serious threats are created, we have to answer in the most concrete way. Queen a5 check. It's lucky for us that we have this check. And now white actually has a choice. So white's choice is, essentially either c3 or bishop d2. Other moves are less sensible, also because the queen, for instance, has to keep on looking at this knight. So queen d2 is thus out of the question. Bishop d2, queen takes b5, knight takes e6. This is sort of the point of this particular move order with bishop d2. Now, temporarily, black is a piece up. This is already something. It's good news, right? But a lot of things are hanging. White is threatening the knight, the bishop, and also knight c7, after which the queen on b5 is hanging. So this is sort of the common theme of the Austrian attack. All of these pieces are hanging. But right now, we can defend very actively. We can just play queen takes b2. Not only do we remove the queen from b5, now the queen is no longer hanging, but we also make sure that white cannot take on g4 because the rook on a1 is hanging. So this is very, very active defense. And as for our hanging bishop, we are already a piece up, a couple of pawns soon. So this is not a problem. Rook b1 is theory. We take queen a2. And now in this and similar positions, it's very rarely good for white to go for the rook, because the knight will be basically trapped on a8 and will never make it out alive. And the bishop on g7 is much more valuable of a target. So white takes it. King f7. And okay, this line is just barely playable for white. White castles. Now the knight is hanging. And after knight f6, basically, we're 2 pawns up, and this knight is, semi-trapped. So white, after rook e1, white gets sort of playable compensation, maybe. But essentially, after knight bd7, black is 2 pawns up. These are the 2 pawns, and white should still go out with the knight. So white doesn't really have any serious attack. 2 pawns down, and maybe white has enough compensation with very good play, but essentially this line is just sort of outdated by now, not sufficiently dangerous for black to compensate for the 2 pawns that are, that had to be sacrificed for this. So let's go back. see how we got here. We came here by playing bishop d2 with white and sacrificing a few pawns. The more solid approach is c3. We take the knight. Knight takes e6. Now we already see that the tactical motives we learn in one line, they are very often helpful in other lines, because we have the same situation now as before. Black is a piece up, and white has a lot of threats, right? So we cannot really keep the piece. And now we cannot take on b2 either. So we have this sort of, it's a key moment and a key move that we need to remember, how we like magically hold everything together by playing queen c4. It's a really unusual motive, so it's good to pay attention here and to remember this particular one. Black attacks the knight, but also this queen will be ready. Let me make it green. Queen will be ready to hold the c7 square very soon. And also the queen remains on this diagonal, preventing white from castling, right? So the queen on c4 is as busy as piece could possibly be. And now, white takes on g4, looks awesome, to be honest, for white, right? Looks really, really dominant, because, the queen on g4 supports the knight on e6. Black is hanging everywhere. But black has a trick, right? C takes d4. Then this controls the c7 square, very important. But also, the white knight turns out to be trapped after knight takes g7. I mean, white has not much of a choice. Knight g7, king f7. And now we have a new picture altogether, right? It's now white who is a piece up, but the knight is trapped. The knight is trapped, and there are several ways for white to try to play this position. For instance, knight h5 dc works very well for black. Just tactically, the king on e1 is so vulnerable to all sorts of tricks that white starts losing material. And knight f5, queen e6, just wins the knight again. And basically, no matter what white does, black ends up, well, with some very nice looking positions, with some good endings most of the time. And once, the dust settles, for instance, after knight f5, queen e6, knight e3 leads to an ending. Once things settle down and we get some sort of an ending, for instance, here we can make a few moves to not, do everything blindfold. That, for instance, some such ending, right? Then black is usually the one who has a better, an easy ending to play, because long term, this bishop is problematic because, white's pawns on the dark squares, this bishop is passive, and black has a lot of potential to sort of just get a grip on the light squares and slowly have a better minor piece. At the very least, it's not a problem for black at all, right? So this is an important line to remember, but once you do remember, especially this key move, queen c4, then you are in absolutely good shape. And this whole line is knight takes b5 in this position. The other move that basically has fallen out of fashion is queen takes g4. There was a certain brief spell of popularity for this move, but this was basically in the 80s. And 80s, though, a wonderful time, gave us some great music, ABBA and whatnot. It was a long time ago. So theoretically, queen g4 is outdated, and after bishop c4, black actually gets a great position. We have certain, more information at least we have on this line after bishop c4 in our chapter on model games. So there was a very sort of instructive game here. Nan Seyravan played in the World Cup in '89. I show it in the model games with some middle game and some end game ideas. So please check it out. For the theoretical part, bishop c4 is enough knowledge. After this, black has two bishops, a pawn up, and white has another pawn hanging, and there is simply not enough justification for playing this with white, especially since after b3, bishop takes d4, black wins some material. But yeah, for details, please check out the model games. And yeah, for the theoretical part, knowing bishop c4 is enough. So queen g4 is basically out of fashion by now. This leaves us with knight takes e6, which is, well, a scary looking move, right? Black has a queen hanging. So bear with me because I'm just beginning to count. The bishop hanging, another bishop hanging with check, and the knight hanging, which, well, must be a world record, right? To have 4 pieces, including the queen hanging after move 10. But it only takes one move to make everything right. Like plays bishop takes d4. Now it probably is not, it's no longer something special to discover a move now that we all have computers and the like. It used to be different. And back then, whoever discovered bishop takes d4 first and the whole line must have been so pleased. And this sort of pleasure of discovering a move in chess, novelty, we cannot really imitate this anymore. We just don't have this, which is, I think one of the drawbacks that we have having computers. Just discovering new moves has become just so much easier now. Sometimes I miss the old days. So the point is obviously that if white takes the queen, we'll have a perpetual check, as we'll see. So in fact, the only critical move is knight takes b5 here, the only move to get a game. Queen a5 check. So the queen was hanging, but it's still alive, right? And now white has, couple of moves that we need to know. Queen d2 isn't great. Of course, we cannot take the knight because of knight e7 check. So we take the queen, bishop d2, and we just play king d7. So once again, white has a choice. We have this ending, the like of it, the like of this ending we have already seen. Black has a powerful knight against the bishop, which is restricted by its own pawn. The pawn that came to a 4 on move 4, right? The feature of the Austrian attack, so we might as well call it the Austrian pawn, limits the dark squared bishop, and black has the better ending in the long run. I mean, imagine some sort of the future where this knight either makes it to e4 or makes it to f5. The knight has a lot of really nice light squares to sit on, and the dark squared bishop doesn't have a lot of the future. And the black king is actually very happy to already be in the center, make it green, to already be in the center for the ending. So these endings are generally great for black. And another theme here is that very often white goes for the rook. Black has usually amazing compensation for the exchange. Black is so central, and black's pieces are so powerful. And in a way, I just find it, almost unfair that white somehow makes it out of here alive. I think after a4, somehow white knight survives this. But anyway, this is not a recommendable ending for white, even after the knight survives. So this is not the way for white to play. Basically just asking for trouble. c3 is maybe a safer choice, and after bishop f2, this usually ends in a draw. White cannot go to a light square, because then queen b5 will be checked. So after king d2, bishop e3, there were hundreds of games that ended with a draw. King c2 is not great here after queen a4 check, and usually ends with the black's advantage. So white should really go king e1, bishop f2, and this is a draw. One of those old draws that have been repeated a number of times. And this basically is the story of knight takes b5, and this leaves us with, knight takes d8, which is, well, it should be the critical move because it takes the queen, but it really leaves us with no contents to discuss, because after bishop f2, king d2, bishop e3, we can do this for a long time without much effort. Yeah, it's perpetual check, and the game is drawn, which is always a success for black from the theoretical point of view. And well, white needs to look for something else to continue the game. So this was the story of e6, which was sort of sharp, but not really enough to pose any opening problems. So in order to try to push for an advantage with white needs to try one of the other two moves, h3 or bishop takes d7. So, well, let's look at those. This brings us to h3, which is, well, a natural move and one of the, as I said, three crucial continuations. It attacks the knight naturally, and is also similar to some other lines, right? Where white, takes on d7 first and then plays h3. So there is a certain overlap, certain similarity. Basically, these are similar lines, where the difference is that either white takes on d7 in some lines, or some lines black takes on b5. So basically, sometimes the difference will be either the position of the black piece, or the knight will be on b5, so in some similar lines. So anyway, here we have to take c takes d4. We are not going back. Yeah? This is the thing. For as long as we can, we avoid going knight h6. So basically, first we want to force certain concessions from white, some weakening, something, before we have to go back. So for now, we are attacking the knight. Queen takes d4. So this is basically the only thing that has independent value. Now we take on b5, so we continue postponing the necessity to go back. Yeah, we are not really happy. Make it red. We're not really happy on h6. So we want to postpone this for some concessions, right? So white will definitely take the bishop. The bishops are very valuable in this position. And now once again, we try to force some sort of a move before we have to go knight h6, well, in the hope that maybe something will happen and we might never have to. So this is basically the hope. And now white has a couple of squares we need to discuss. The most natural square is always e4, but there is some point also to a4 where white defends this knight that is often hanging, and also looks at the black king through the knights, so to speak. So let's have a look at queen a4 first. I think queen e4 is a more central continuation. We'll return to this. And now with we ran out of tricks, which means we have to go knight h6. And now we are not, well, we're not altogether without counterplay, right? This pawn is still hanging. The knight coming to f5 is a serious positional threat. And white is also a bit all over the place, right? The king is still on e1, and white is far away from completing the development. And And thus white also needs to hurry, right? White plays bishop d2. It's a safer square than e3, right? Because on e3, white bishop is immediately kicked, and white is preparing to castle long. So we castle short, white castles long, and here, okay, we have several positional things to solve before we are completely fine. One of them is a potential weakness of this pawn on d6. So if white, were able to take on d6, now that white castled, white can start, taking pawns. And the other potential positional problem is this knight on h6. So in the next two moves, we will, be able to solve both problems, which will give us a great position. So first we take, so one problem solved, no potential weakness on d6. Now white takes back with a pawn, by far the more threatening. Now this sort of the file is potentially tactically dangerous for us. And this knight is in danger of getting sidelined on h6 more or less forever. So we have to get this knight out. Now this knight is out. The pawn is no longer on d6, so we do not have any weaknesses. White, in fact, has a potential weakness on e5. And positionally, we are completely fine. Everything is well placed, defended. White has weaknesses. But the last question to answer is what to do after g4. So basically, white is attacking this knight. And for a moment, it looks like this knight doesn't have good squares. We are definitely not going back, never going back. We're definitely not going to g3, where we'll be trapped. So this is kind of not what we want. And for the moment, it looks like, the black strategy did not pay off. And then turns out, we have this magical solution, a6, counter-attack. The counter-attack is basically the solution for black in this line, like always, and same here. And suddenly, black just solves all the problems because AB is such a big threat. The pawn on a2 is hanging also after white moves the queen, and white likely will go knight c3, and then we just go knight fd4. And suddenly we also have a threat to catch the queen with b5, and things just work out, and white remains with weaknesses, and well, nothing to be happy about. So this required some knowledge, some precision, and some very dynamic play. But once things worked out, they worked out really, really great, which is what happens in this line, where your knowledge of the opening will be rewarded, and will be rewarded not just with a playable position, but very often with a great position at the end of the line. So this was pretty forcing line of queen a4. And this leaves us with queen e4, which is a more natural, a more popular, more central continuation. And once again, before we go knight h6, it is useful to get as much out of the position as we can. So we go queen b6, attacking the knight, and also looking at the square f2 with some intent. And now basically these knights on g4 and b5, they're not of the same value. White's entire strategy is focused on forcing this knight back to h6. And whenever white fails to do this, usually something goes wrong. So for instance, here going for the material is very dangerous for white. The black just castles, and after d takes e7, rook e8, white has a lot of problems on the e file, especially since white cannot castle. I mean, castling long is tempting but illegal. We have to sort of stay within the bounds of legality. One of the things I like about chess is also, just how clear cut the laws are in chess, and if the move is illegal, then usually nobody tries it. A good thing. So returning to chess, 8g is not a good move. Going for the pawn once again is not worth it in this opening. So white will probably go queen e2, cover f2, and cover b5. And we continue with the same strategy, as long as we can avoid playing knight h6. We should. So we go a6, making a useful move, attacking this knight, forcing a slight concession, a slight deactivation of the knight first before we go knight h6. And basically now there is some theory here, some correspondence theory too, of some high-level games, and they have shown that knight a3 is by far the best move that white has. The knight is coming to c4, so we'll just trust this. The other knight c3 is knight h6, for instance, is not good for white. The knight has no business on c3, since knight d5 runs into queen a5 check. But anyway, let's just trust the existing theory for now. Knight a3 is the best move. Knight h6, knight c4, and we go queen d8. And basically, I think the first tactical skirmish is over, more or less. And black has a good structure, especially if the knight will make it to f5. And after castling, black will be very safe on g8. And in general, also the pawn is coming to b5, attacking this knight. So there is some theory here, but essentially it seems to me that that black is going to be doing very well soon. Of course, in correspondence chess, they somehow made it playable for white, but as far as I can see, black has zero problems in this position. And especially since, as always, opening the e file is dangerous for white, since white is not really ready for any opening of the files. So this is the story of queen e4, and more broadly of this whole line with h3. So now we are done with e6. We looked at h3, and this leaves us with the last but not least, bishop takes d7. So as you see, the lines are actually not very difficult. They're numerous but not difficult, and I think we know them really well by now. So bishop d7 is the last move we need. Queen takes d7. We should take with the queen. It's very important to cover the squares, right? We know about e6, knight g5 tricks, so we need to cover those squares. And now white has basically the last bit of structural choice. After this, the path, they will diverge structurally. So this choice is h3 or d5. And they will lead to very different positions that we need to look at closely. So the final structural choice, h3 or d5. So h3 is, the same as before, right? It's so easy once we know the ideas. Once again, we try not to go to h6 before we have to, right? This is the point. So we gain some positional advantages before we have to retreat. So we first attack the knight. We already know the strategy, right? Queen takes d4, we attack the queen. The queen has to move, and once again, it's most popular. And here, also because white doesn't have tactics right now, the white knight is on c3, as opposed to the other position. White will go to the center, stay in the center, and now we are running out of tricks. And we go to h6. So basically, by doing this, by postponing this knight h6 move, we made some gains in the center, right? The white pawn on d4 has disappeared. The white pawn on e5 is about to become a weakness. And if our knight makes it to f5, and it will be a monster of a piece, right? Threatening knight g3, causing all sorts of trouble for the white pieces. So now, two things to know. G4 is always important strategically. White tries to limit the knight on h6. And black needs something of a plan to stop, bishop d2, castles long with the dominant position. And for this, we have a very nice trick. We play rook d8, which basically prevents everything white wanted. So after bishop e3, we have d5, d4, and if that doesn't work well, we have takes, preventing castling long. And then white will have problems with the pawn on e5. But most importantly, after bishop d2, we have takes on e5 and takes on e5. So we prevent white's main plan and leave white sort of hanging there with the king on e1, not clear where it can go. Sort of the pawn is hanging after bishop d2, and in the long run, white has problems with the king as well. So this is important to know, that after g4 we have rook d8, and this leaves white with bishop e3, very, very logical, very natural too. Knight f5, we sort of follow the strategy. This knight has to start sort of moving. Bishop f2, and now once again, white is just one move away from control, right? White threatens either g4 or castles long, and once our pieces will be forced back, will not be doing very well. But we have a trick. D takes e5, f takes e5, keeping the knight a bit stranded on f5 after g4, right? And now, surprisingly, it turns out to be possible to take on e5, which is, maybe not what we expected, but we'll definitely take it, right? It's a big, big central pawn. Knight takes e5, queen e6. It's not the tactic that you see every day, but basically, yeah, the knight on e5 is hanging and cannot move because behind there are too many tactical weaknesses, right? Bishop c3 would actually win the queen, which means we win the knight on e5, and basically, okay, white will probably get the b7 pawn in return, but we will, win the central pawn, solve forever the problem of the knight on f5. Knight will actually become a good piece. So we'll have the knight on f5, the bishop on e5, and castle short, and we'll have a full share of chances with central pawns. Basically, we win the knight back, zero problems after that. So there are, of course, some tactical tricks to learn, but yeah, they are not super difficult, especially after you have seen this course. And this means that we can sort of go back and summarize a bit. So in this position, last important choice, g4, rook d8 was important. And after bishop e3, we had this trick with winning the central pawn, which means we are done with h3, leaves white with the final structural choice, d5. Changes everything, because now the pawn is on d5, it becomes a bit more Benoni, and also we sort of get to take this pawn. And now this knight will never, ever go to h6. h3 is the whole point of white setup. White attacks the knight and tries to take on e5 after that. and get the central pawns and the like. But we have a trick, right? You have probably seen a similar trick already in this course, but also elsewhere. How does black prevent white from taking the pawn on e5? Well, can move this pawn, right? And then no pawn, no problem. So, and very importantly, white does not get to move his pawn away from f4. This remains forever a strategic problem. The Austrian pawn, if I may, limiting the Austrian bishop. Yeah, we'll just stick to it. Yeah. By the way, I really like the Austrian cinema and the Austrian TV. A similar, no, not similar, quite a different topic. But yeah, just needed to say it once. Yeah, the Austrian TV, very, very good stuff. So anyway, e4. Now white can take this knight. Rarely a good idea, taking the knight that was the whole point of white's strategy. Takes. The important bit is that this line is not dangerous for black. I mean, there is no king on g8. There is nobody to attack on this line. We just go on knight a6, and probably will castle long. And white has enough troubles with the weaknesses that white has. Very difficult to keep all those pawns alive. And yeah, the h-file just will not bring anything to white. So this is not really great. And people usually just take knight takes e4. We'll go knight f6. So no knight h6 anymore. The knight is never going to h6. And yeah, there was some theoretical discussion here. There are some things to sort of know. They're not difficult really. So in knight e5, we can go queen d8, knight f6, ef, kicking this knight, and then castling and getting our favorite structure, make it green, where the 4 pawns create this fortress in front of our king forever. So we'll have the safe king forever. It's a beautiful thing. Taking on c5, I think can be treated in many ways. From what I recall, queen d6 is the best. So attack this knight, keep attacking this pawn, and white cannot take on b7 because queen b4 will pick it up. Beautiful. And black gets a really great position after taking on d5. So white takes on f6, bishop takes f6, castles, and basically there is not so much to report on these positions. It's just like super safe for black. There is nothing wrong with black's position. Black gets a lot of counterplay all the time against this pawn on d5, either by playing e6 or by attacking it directly. Some good players have been here. I remember a game by Michael Adams, but I also remember a game by Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. So everything, is very high quality, very, very respectable. You don't have to be ashamed of playing this position when some great players have been there. And in fact, you wouldn't have to be ashamed anyway. Yeah, but it's a great position, and you can play it with with pride. So some lines: knight e5, queen d6 doesn't really help white, as things are hanging. Like both of these are likely to be a problem. c4, it's a good positional move, but now this diagonal will always be strong for black. White will never be able to get these pawns to b2, c3. So this is no longer possible. The e6 open things up. I think Magnus had a game here, if I'm not mistaken, against Rauf Mamedov. White somehow survived that, but okay. What to do? Black gets a lot of counterplay. White has weaknesses potentially in the center. And I think bishop e3 is white's favorite choice. And I remember seeing this position, 30 years ago for the first time, maybe. and in the game Yusuf of Adams. And I was wondering then, and I wonder still, why not take bishop takes b2? Looks to me like a healthy pawn to take. Rook b1, bishop g7, and white will take the pawn on c5, and we'll play rook d8, and then maybe at some point knight a6, rook a c8. I have a feeling that white's pawn structure is filled with weaknesses that maybe we'll be able to exploit in a long run. So I feel we complete the development, we get to some ending, and then we start outplaying white, because white has way too many pawn weaknesses. So yeah, I feel that we are doing really, really well in the Austrian attack with black. There are of course some lines we needed to learn, but all in all, I think it's a fantastic opening with really, really great ideas. So to summarize a bit, this was bishop takes d7, and I feel it was not even very sort of difficult to learn. I mean, d5 is very straightforward, and h3 we just sort of attack a few times before we move the knight. So this was sort of not even very theoretically heavy. E6, of course, is big theory, but we did really great there. Of course, white can make a draw after taking the queen, but what to do? You cannot win them all. And h3 was very similar, right, to bishop takes d7, where we attack the white pieces a few times before moving the knight to h6. In fact, sometimes managed to keep this knight on g4 for a really, really long time. And I think we learned the ideas, we learned the tricks. I feel that we are really ready to face this now. Of course, white has ways not to play e5. Bishop takes d7, knight d7, d5, but we also saw that this is, well, if anything, this is more promising for black. So yeah, I actually expected the Austrian attack to be a problem for black when I was preparing this course, but it's actually, I'm really happy about where we are in this opening in general, and especially in the Austrian attack. I think we have all the chances to get a great game out of this. I think black is doing really, really well here, so I'm very happy about this. Hopefully so are you.